Yeah, I'll have to go into my kids still have a costume box. I mean, they're too old to play in it, but I still have it for them. So I need to go into the costume box and find a good hat.
Well, one of the reasons I'm suggesting is, I'm sorry?
This is Gretchen. I don't know if you were around when we first started during COVID. I always wore the emergency wig.
Oh, wow. Well, I was going to say, I'm prompting this hat thing because during New York Fashion Week, I went to one of the shows, and this model had this amazing hat on that I know I will never wear because it is so over the top. But I may wear it for this our hat meeting.
Okay. Love
When
to
I
see.
when I bought it, I said, "No, why am I buying this hat? I'm not going to ever wear this thing." But it was just so fantastic. I just had to buy it. I snatched it right off the model. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Rhoda.
Hello. Hi, Reggie. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hi.
We're going to have a fun meeting where we're going to call it a hat meeting. Everyone gets to wear their most interesting hat.
I love it.
We're 2 minutes away. What's the counter here? 1, 2. We're 6, and we need 9, right?
9.
But
Hello,
thank you all.
everybody.
Happy International Women's Day.
Yes.
Hi.
Woohoo!
I'm not supposed to say this, but women do rule.
Yes.
Of course they do.
Well, I'm thinking about my mom and both of my grandmothers and
Right on.
just how none of them are with me anymore, but certainly my mom and her mom they were my soulmates. I mean, they were my best friends. And so just thinking about everything that they did and all the things that they do, the things that they did.
Yeah.
Well, they live on through you and your traditions, right?
Exactly.
I would say so. I think. I don't know.
6.
I don't know. They
3, 6, 7.
We're 7, Ron.
7, yeah.
So we need 2 more, right?
Carl is going to come on any minute, yeah.
I think I've eaten enough today for 2 people. Does that count?
It's been a long COVID in that regard, I must say.
But we're still here to tell the story. Again, thank you all for being available. Just waiting for a quorum. 2 to go.
How are you doing, Mariah? I haven't seen you in so long.
I'm doing great, thank you. How are
Good.
you, Lauren? How's everything with you?
Just busy. Busy.
I know you and public art are just working really hard.
Thank you. Not to mention a little war that's going on. It's, there's a lot going on. It is consuming all of us.
Yes.
It is,
Just awful.
pardon?
It's just awful.
Yeah.
We are so fortunate that we have not had war on our land in our country, but I feel for these kids and mothers is just devastating.
I think we're 9 now.
Okay.
Yes, we are 9. Did I count right, Rhonda?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I
Yeah.
think that's correct because Jose's here now and Hector
Carla-
and Natalie. So we're
Carla.
10 actually.
Good, good. So I have to check.
Carla's here.
My Texas math isn't always the best, so. So the meeting will come to order. The time is now 3:02 p.m. on Monday, March 7, 2022. This is a special meeting of the District of Columbia Commission on the Arts and Humanities. My name is Reggie Van Lee, chairperson of the commission. I'm wearing a navy suit and a white shirt. I'm an African-American man. The purpose of this special meeting is the consideration of the revision of the bylaws. Hooray! Notice of the meeting was posted on the commission's website, dcarts.dc.gov, on the DC Office of Open Government's Central Meetings calendar, and in the District of Columbia Register. I will now call the roll. When you hear your name, please answer present. Stacy, Cora,
Present.
Maggie,
Present.
Juanice, Rona,
Present.
Natalie,
Present.
Kimber,
Present.
Marianne, Marianne. I see you, Marianne. Mariah,
Present.
Cece, Carla,
Present.
Hector,
Present.
Jose,
Present.
Gretchen, Derek.
Present.
Thank you. And did Marianne come back? Anyway, a quorum is present. This is a meeting of a public body held in open session in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, DC Law 18-350, DC Official Code 2-571, 2-580. The meeting is being conducted remotely using the Cisco Webex virtual meeting platform and is being live streamed to the Commission's YouTube channel. An electronic recording of the meeting will be available for viewing online following the conclusion of the meeting. I will now read the land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We stand on the ancestral lands of the CAH and the Piscataway people. We pay respects to the elders past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events to use such truths to guide the legacy of this Arts Commission. So once again, the purpose of today's meeting is the consideration of the revision of the bylaws. The current bylaws will not be considered. If any member wishes to retain any item from the existing bylaws, it must be presented in full as an amendment to the revision. The chair of the Bylaws Committee will report. Rona?
Thank you, Reggie. On behalf of the Bylaws Committee, I move that as a substitute for the present bylaws, as a revision, the bylaws submitted by the committee be adopted with the following proviso, that we will all review them today and approve them.
The question is
Richard?
on, the question is on the adoption of the bylaws proposed by the committee as a substitute for the present bylaws. The committee chair will now present the proposed bylaws, one article or one section at a time, by reading the title of the article or section and giving a brief explanation of its content. After each article or section is presented, it will be open to debate and amendment. For an amendment of an article or a section is completed, the next one will be presented and considered. The standard amendment process is applied. The text can be amended by adding or inserting words, sentences, or paragraphs, striking out words, sentences, or paragraphs, striking out words and inserting new ones simultaneously, and substituting a paragraph or more of context and inserting a new text in that place. So I'm gonna read that again just so that it's clear. The standard amendment process is applied. The text can be amended by adding or inserting words, sentences, or paragraphs, striking out words, sentences, or paragraphs, striking out words and inserting new ones simultaneously, and substituting a paragraph or more of text and inserting a new text in its place. Amendments must be seconded in order to be considered, and primary amendments can themselves be altered by secondary amendments. No section or article will be adopted until all have been opened to amendments. After each section or article has been opened to amendment, the entire document will be open for additional amendments. So with that long-winded intro, are there any questions? There's no wonder it's taken us 8 years to amend the bylaws with all the procedures we have to go through, but this is what we have to go through. So my apologies, but this is the way we have to do it. So let's begin Article 1, Commissioner Friedman.
Article 1 is just the name of, I'm going to do Article 1 and 2 together because 1 is just the name of who we are, and Article 2 is the authority and purpose. So Article 1 is what we're going to be called the commission, as known as CAH, or the agency, and the Board of Commissioners will be called the board in future for reading these bylaws. Article 2 is authority and purpose, and these pertain to different laws in the District of Columbia which allow us to exist. And our Section 2 is our purpose. And just so you note that the CAH is the designated state arts agency for the District of Columbia. And 2 is our purpose. And then I believe Reggie has to call for any amendments to Article 1 or 2.
Let me ask the question of Jeff. Do we have to read through aloud each of the sections 1 and 2, or is it sufficient that it's on the screen, people are looking at it, and that's their basis for either offering an amendment or not?
Yeah, it's fine like this, as long as Rona introduces it, gives a brief explanation, and then we can open it for amendments.
Good. So are there any amendments to Article 1 and Article 2, both Sections 1 and Section 2 of Article 2? Hearing no.
No, Reggie, I have one. I am sharing it in the chat, so the text is available. To do this, I guess we will need a second, and then we can discuss, and I can give some of the logic behind it as I understand it. So,
Jose, you have to read it out loud so
Okay.
everyone hears it. And
Okay.
tell us exactly what you're looking to amend and where.
Yeah, page 1, under authority, number 2, personnel authority. I move to strike the words that say it is the personnel authority for the agency, including the executive director, and shall establish policies, procedures, and guidelines for the agency and administer and oversee their implementation.
Before we vote on it, Jeff, wasn't that taken from the statute? I just want to make, because the word personnel authority is what Carl had used. I want to make sure I'm not mistaken before I respond.
So I believe the way that the statute is written is that the commission is the personnel authority for the executive director. The executive director is the personnel authority for the remainder of the staff.
So I don't believe, Jose, we can strike or amend something that's in our statute gives us our establishment and our ability to do business. I don't think that can be amended.
Well, it seemed to me, I might be wrong on this, so I would ask our legislative person to, Jeff, to let me know. I thought the current legislation says that the commission is the personnel authority for the ED only, and that the ED is the personnel authority for the remainder. And I thought here you are including the executive director as the overseer of everything. Am I missing something, Jeff? And then according to, and this is from, I think I was in the Bylaws Committee many moons ago. According to the NEA's eligibility requirements for state art agencies, it says that the board, the commission, council, whatever we want to call it, must be advisory or policy-making in nature in relation to the agency itself. These bylaws purport to be authoritative and governing in nature, not advisory and policy-making.
So we should get a second before we have any further discussion.
Okay.
I second.
I'm just making sure it didn't quite sit with me based on what I remember. So I will stand corrected if I'm on the wrong.
And the way I read that is it's saying that the commission board is.
Wait, Derek, we have to have a motion to look, and then we have to have discussion, and then we can have and then we need a second before we start discussing it, so.
Derek already
Okay,
seconded.
but someone seconded and I made a second.
Derek seconded it, so we're not.
Okay.
Thank you, Derek.
Derek,
So the way I read that statement as saying is the commission board has control over the personnel of the agency and the executive director.
That,
I believe that is, I don't agree with that, and I think it's just the executive director, or the board is hiring all the DC government employees that work for the Commission of Arts and Humanities.
that's not how this reads, is the personnel authority for the agency, including the executive director. And the CAH board has the ability to establish policies and procedures and guidelines for the agency and administer and oversee their implementation. That is in our enabling statute, and it's listed under 39204 with powers of the commission and what we're allowed to do in our 2020 enabling statute that I'm reading here. And all this this provision goes on to state what we're allowed to do. And as I understand it, personnel authority is a term of art used in our statute. So I don't think that explanation coincides with our enabling statute.
so let me see if I understand what perhaps the disconnect is. Is one concern that this, as written, is suggesting that the commissioners have some authority over the staff, including the executive director, versus the commissioners have authority over just the executive director, but not the staff? Is that the?
That is correct.
Yeah, I don't know if, Jeff, you can clarify that, because I don't think it's following the legislation. You're our expert in this.
Yeah, I mean, your read on the legislation is correct. And so if I understand what you're objecting to is that the line personnel authority for the agency implies executive director and staff, which is not in alignment with what the statutes currently say.
That was my point. Sorry.
If we wanted it to align with the statute, Jeff, give us a language that would align with the statute.
It would be as Jose read that.
And you have it on the chat also. Sorry, Jeffrey. It's on the chat, so if you want to see it. It's basically that the authority should be only for the ED, not over ED and staff and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to be fair and following legislation. Thank you.
What I'm reading in the chat says you're striking all the words, and you don't mean to strike all the words. So I need to be clear on what words are we striking. Seems like we could strike agency, comma, including the.
Right, like that.
That's what we'd be striking.
Or.
So it would read, it is the personal authority for the executive director.
Right.
And the words agency, comma, including the would be stricken.
Correct.
Just
That
want to
works
understand.
for me too.
So that's the suggested amendment. So now, Jeff, do I call for a vote on the amendment?
Or any other discussion, any other support?
Yeah, if there's no more discussion, we can vote on the amendment.
Any other discussion? So it's curious to me. I'm not sure if we can really vote if indeed the statute says those words have to be stricken. That's what it is. I guess we could still vote, but so Jeff, help me with.
According to Robert's rules, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess we need it in anything where there's an amendment, and it's been submitted, second, and discussed, we now vote on that correction. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jensen.
Right.
I mean.
No, you're correct. But I'm just saying
Yeah.
that if indeed by the statute, we're obligated to strike the words we just talked about. People should know that. So when they vote in alignment with the legislation. That's all I was saying. So I wouldn't say we shouldn't vote.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that we're following the legislation.
Yeah, of course.
The way. So Jeff,
You can ask for unanimous consent to approve the amendment. So you don't have to go through full roll call since it's in keeping with what the statute already says.
I'm happy to go through it. I just wanted to help people to understand if they want to abide by the statute. What I'm hearing is the words agency, comma, including thee would have to be stricken if you want to abide by the statute.
obligated, yeah.
That discussion before we took the vote so that people understand what they're voting on.
Yes,
So
you're right, Reggie. It's obligated there. Yeah, thank you.
any other discussion?
So my question is, so Carl isn't with the agency anymore. Is there anybody else in the legal staff who can, because I'm a bit confused here.
Jeff is our legislative person. He should be, and he's familiar with the bylaws. It is as to what the legislation says and what the new bylaws say. This expanded the authority of the sheriff.
I think this is just to make sure that this language conforms with what's already in the statutes, just so it's explicitly clear.
Yeah, and let me ask something, Reggie and Jeff.
I'm just saying, I'd like to hear from, and the CAH legislative staff. And didn't they review this before we got to a vote on this?
We're amending all of this, so I'm not sure that they
That
have.
would matter, you know.
Yeah, but it just seems like a lot of non-lawyers are talking about this. I mean, except for Rona. So I'm just.
I guess my question, Jeff, to you that will solve all this, is that the direct language that you took when you wrote the authority and purpose from the statutes? And if it is, we cannot amendment. If it isn't, we can.
It's not the direct, what's in there right now is not the direct language from the statute.
Okay. If that's the case, Natalie, then we can take out 2 words.
3 words and a comma.
Thank you, Reggie.
I'm precise if nothing else.
Yeah. And if anything, just clarification, Jeff is basically, he might not be an attorney, but he is our legislative person. And he would be, do we have anybody else in legal left after Carl left? Do we have a second person? Or was it only Carl, Jeffrey?
We have at least 3 attorneys.
My question is, where is the statute? Is it available for us to look at, or are we just taking somebody's word?
It is in the legislation, Cora.
I mean,
It was
I know
sent
where
out.
it is. Hey, Jose,
Mhm.
I didn't say where it is. I said, is it available to us this moment?
Oh, okay, that would be up to Jeffrey.
Well, I was talking to Jeffrey, Jose. So Jeffrey,
Already.
is the statute available for us to look at so we can just all know what it
Yes, ma'am.
says?
Let me pull that up real quick.
Yeah, I think that's the answer
Thank
to
you.
that. We don't have to keep asking people. Read it.
But for the record, I think it's important that we adhere to the statute. So that's
Yeah, but we got to see what the statute says and just not take people's word for it.
exactly.
Okay, oh wait, not that. Okay, do y'all see this?
Yes.
For the executive director of the commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Read it out loud because it's small on screen.
So for the executive director of the Commission on the Arts and Humanities, the personnel authority shall be the Commission on the Arts and Humanities. And for any other employee of the Commission on the Arts and Humanities, the personnel authority shall be the executive director of the Commission on the Arts and Humanities.
Why don't we use that exact language, Jeff?
Exactly.
That's what I was gonna say. Let's just use that.
Yeah. If it's
Jeff,
written, use it as written.
Let's just use that. Let's just take that sentence and substitute this language, and then at the end, just please quote the law as it states, as we've done, like section 39-201. Put the law at the end. Can you just quickly transfer that so people see it, they know what they're voting for?
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
So
Thank you, Laura.
this would be considered a further amendment. So we had the amendment that we got a motion and a second on.
It was never voted on, Reggie, so it's not a further one.
Okay.
This is an amendment that is first and second, and then we have to vote on it to be in place.
Well, no one has moved on this, and I'm trying to follow procedure.
No, what I'm saying is I move to incorporate the words of the statute directly instead of the last sentence of authority under section 1, article 2 of our bylaws.
Can I second the motion?
Before I take that motion, I want to make sure that the person that moved the amendment before, Jose, is okay that we're now moving to another amendment that is just repeating that which is in the statute.
That is quite fine with me. Thank you, Reggie.
I want to make sure, we don't run past anything. So if you're fine with that, and Derek, you're fine with your second now be moved to this new amendment?
Yes.
Good. So now, Rona, please make your motion.
And then now you can call a consensus vote, as Jeff said before. We don't have to go individually for this amendment.
Well, once again, I don't want people to have a point of view and feel like they were bullied into a general vote. So I want to go through the vote. This is the motion. Is this second?
I second it.
Okay. Any discussion on this? So I will go through the roll call and vote as to whether you agree with this amendment or not. Stacy? Cora?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Quanice? Rona?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Kimber? Marianne? Mariah?
Yes.
Cece?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Hector?
Yes.
Jose?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes.
Derek?
Yes.
So that passes, that amendment. So we've approved Article 1 and Article 2, Sections 1 and 2, with the amendment as offered and approved. Thank you. I know this is tedious, but we have to do it the right way, ladies and
That's
gentlemen.
right.
So while we go to the next-
We waited this long, might as well do it.
and to do it right, because I don't want there to be any chatter afterwards that we
Yeah.
jump over things and that sort of stuff. So I want to do it exactly right. So Rhonda, why don't you take us to the next one?
And then we're on Article 3. Article 3 contains 3 different sections. Section 1 is commissioners. I'm just giving you the titles. 2 is responsibilities. 3 is ethics. 4 is conflict of interest. And 5 is disciplinary matters. And to summarize that, the commissioners are appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of council according to the code. And the responsibilities listed are, as public officials, we have responsibilities, and they include six listed statements. So I presume you've all read them. The third section is ethics. And this is again, subject to DC law, which is the Hatch Act and the Ethics Act and the Code of Conduct Act. And then the section 4 is conflict of interest, which again complies with DC law. And then section 5 is disciplinary matters. So let me see if anyone, let's start with any questions for commissioners, section 1, commissioners and how they're appointed. If not, section 2, responsibilities. Section 3 would be ethics, which is again the Hatch Act, Vegas laws, and DC laws. Conflicts of interest, which is according to the DC code. And then disciplinary matters. So if you have any questions or statements about those areas, please offer your amendment and we can have a discussion. We're not going to vote on these articles individually. We're going to wait till we get to the ends. And the amendments will be included in the articles as they come up, but we're not voting article per article. We're allowed by Robert's rules and the statutes to vote on the whole thing at the end. As Jeff mentioned, I just want to remind you in the beginning.
I
think Derek has his hand raised.
My question is, last one where it was legislative and no change could be made to it. Are there any areas of these items that were redlined or changed by legislation, or will be going through the same procedure all over again?
No, as far as I understand, and Jeff and I went through this, if you just look at conflicts of interest, which is 4, it's in accordance with, if any member is an employee, that is direct language. And then the application of that is under 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So similar to the last discussion, which we decided to take the language from the statute and abide directly from the statute. To your recollection, and I'll ask this of Rona and Jeff, are any of these sections in this article different from the statute? Or are they abiding directly with the statute?
This language is pretty direct.
Yeah. Yeah. We looked at everything and it's pretty direct language from 3 or 4 different statutes. There isn't just one.
Right.
So it is direct, because that was my question. Is it direct or is it pretty direct and there's changes that have been made?
Some of them are direct, some of them are pretty direct. If you want to ask about a specific point here, like look at just section 2(1), faithfully executing the responsibilities, that's direct. Maintaining the confidentiality of matters. So if you have a question about one and you'd like to change it, that's fine, but I don't think we're going through these to see if we use everything direct or indirect. The question is, do you want to keep them here or do you want to change them by amendment? If there's anything objectionable, like Jose mentioned in his first amendment, he said he thought that didn't pertain directly to how he sees our establishment. So we changed it. If there's anything here you see that doesn't apply to our establishment, this is the time to list your amendment.
Exactly, which is why I asked one question, Rona. My question was, are these direct or legislatively direct based on what's in our legislation, or have there been changes made? Because that would lead us to where we just came from, which is changing something that's legislatively.
No, where we just came from, Derek, was a question by a commissioner who said he didn't think it purported to what we should be doing. That's why it changed. If you have a question of how.
It was legislative, Rona. It was
This is
legislative, so let's just admit that we had something in there and made a change that was not legislative. and we had to go back to the legislative language. That was my question. That was what we just went through.
And Jeff just answered. It was asked and answered. So if you have anything
Is there anything here
else?
that either people object to because it doesn't feel right to them, or it might be opposed to the legislative statutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve section.
You're not approving.
You're not approving, Reggie. We're waiting till the end.
Exactly.
So then, okay. So
No.
if not, then we'll move. I'm sorry. I'm reading my notes wrong. We'll move to the next article.
Which is Article 4, which has 5 sections. The first sections list the officers, and it would be the chairperson, the vice chairperson, a secretary, and a treasurer. And then section 2 would list the duties of the chairperson as nominated by section 39203D of the Code of the District of Columbia. And then section 3 would be the duties of the vice chair. Section 4 would be the duties of a secretary. Section 5 would be the duties of the treasurer.
So before we move ahead, I see a note from Carla. Carla, is your note pertaining to what we're looking at now?
No, it was for the last, it was just correcting some just language. It was just kind of wordsmithing, and I just wanted to be on the record for clearing that up.
But I think we can do that at the end, Carla.
Yeah, that's fine. I just figured I'd stick it in there.
Okay.
Thank you. At least
Thank you,
we'll remember.
Carla.
It was more than just edits. It was just kind of reworking.
Okay, don't let us forget it when we get to the end. So I'm sorry, Ronna.
No, thank you, Carla. What we could do is do that at the end as long as it doesn't change the substance of what we voted on.
Right.
Okay, so if
So-
everyone, I presume everyone has read these sections. We've just listed who the offices are, the duties of the chairperson, the vice chair, the secretary, and a treasurer.
Are any amendments to Article 4 rather? And Article 4 has how many sections? Has
It's five sections, Reggie.
So the 5 sections of Article 4, any amendments to that? If not, we'll move on to Article 5.
Article 5 is more technical, and it's basically really very legislative. Excuse me. It has 5 sections, and it has meetings. Meetings is number 1, open meetings, a quorum, how we can hold meetings electronically, and voting by proxy, which will be prohibitive as it is and always has been, and is in most state arts agencies. So this is basically just cleaning up how we meet, when we meet. And as you could see, it's mostly legislative language. And there are, as I said, 5 sections here.
So any amendments to the 5 sections of Article 5? If not, we'll move to the exciting Article 6, which I already see comments in the chat about.
Well, let's just take them one by one.
I have a question.
Yes.
No, I have to read what we're doing, Mary Ann.
Let's hear the question. What's the
No,
question?
I want to go back to when it states about a quorum. Is it the percentage of the people present at the meeting, or is it the percentage of the people who are on the commission?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm glad you asked because I had to look it up. A quorum is of the meeting. To open a meeting is the quorum of the number of commissioners. We have 16, we need 9 to open the meeting. A quorum of a vote is the majority of the people present at the meeting. So thank you for asking because I had to check that out myself.
Okay, so just to be clear, if there are 10 people at a meeting, we have a quorum because we only require 9? Or is it a quorum of the entire?
No, if we have, there are 2 different aspects to it. A quorum of the commission is we have 6, to open this meeting today, we have 16 commissioners. I needed 9 to discuss. Reggie needed 9 to open and to bring these forth to the commission. When we vote on them, today we happen to need a 2/3 vote, but in general, you usually need a quorum or a majority, and that's a majority of the people present of the quorum. So it's a quorum of a quorum.
Right, present at the meeting. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I just ask, what about the applications in terms of a committee meeting? Or this only applies to the full board meeting?
This is full board meetings. Committee
Okay.
meetings to bring forth, Hector, is usually a majority of those in attendance.
Okay, thank you.
Can we clarify that in the description of section 3? Or at?
So it's written, a quorum for a board or of a committee shall consist of a majority of its current membership.
It is
That's
clarified.
good. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's there. Thank you.
Okay. Article 6. And let me just state what they are before we discuss. These are 11 sections, and these include our committees. As I've met, we have 7 standing committees, which are Arts Ed, Executive, Finance, Governance, Grants, IDEA, which is Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, and Public Art. Now, by way of explanation, each one of these sections of the standing committees, Arts Ed, Governance, Grants, IDEA, Public Art, each one wrote their own statement here. And it was put forth by the chair of each standing committee, who was elected by their body of committee members. And these committee members then voted on this, changed it, amended it, and then gave it to us to include in the bylaw. The language from each of the standing committees, which is section 2 to section 8, is language put in by the committees themselves. Just so you know where they came from. And in between section 1 and section 2, there's a statement that I want to read because I want to make sure everyone understands what they're voting for. It's by a resolution of the board, and with a majority vote of the board, the Grants Committee and Public Art Committee shall be permitted to be consolidated into 2 sections designated as Grants and Public Art. While working together, they shall be permitted to have 2 co-chairs and separately delineated goals. This does not mean, and I want to make this very clear, you're voting to do this. This means in the future, this has been going around and around and around for 10 years. So in the future, if someone on the board decides they want to bring it up, it's in the bylaws, so we can basically have it without going through a full amendment process to allow it. It's an if and, it is not something that will happen, but it can happen if so voted on and fully discussed and amended and gone through all the procedures that we're going through today. So I don't want you to think you're voting on this. It's just here as a placeholder in case we need it in the future, because several people have asked for it and several people may not want it. So it's just there again as a placeholder.
Let me ask a question about that, Rona, because several people have raised this with me directly because of the role I play as chair on the Public Arts Committee.
Yeah.
Is there a way to structure the language that would allow that to be a possibility for any of the subgroups? In other words, I think what is sticking out for folks is that it's directed specifically to 2 existing groups, but hypothetically, you would want the possibility to make any kind of structural change in that regard, correct? I mean, you could combine public education with, whatever.
Well, the question is, what is the whatever? Because we were given a task force, we were given directives by the 44 recommendations to have an idea committee. So no, that shouldn't be compliant. We have a public art. we have governance, we have grants. I mean, what would be combined is the question, but we certainly can put in any two committees where a motion is raised, you know, we can just add an additional language. But technically, I don't see where it would happen. But this one issue, Maggie, has been floating around for years. So that's why when people asked, can this happen? I said, no, it cannot happen, but we can put it in as, again, as a placeholder. But if you feel that you want other committees to have the ability to join, and that if you want that as an amendment and people vote on it, that's fine.
No, I was just curious. I'd like to hear from Jose, since he objected.
Mac, I would also like to.
Before anyone else speaks, so we will have at least 3 options here. We could leave things as they are. We could put in the ability to combine any committees and leave it open, or we could put in what is in here now. So just want you to know, those are at least 3 options we have. But
that's right.
Jose, you should be able to speak to what
So,
you in the chat.
Jose needs to actually make a motion and get it seconded.
That's
before we
right.
start.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, your motion is in the chat. You move to delete the proposal to combine
Okay.
public art and grants.
Yeah, I put it on the chat so at least people can see the language.
No, you have to read it so everyone can.
No, I know, I understand. I'm just, for people who like to actually see it, I sent it there. I sort of jumped the gun earlier. I move to delete the proposal to combine the Public Art and Grants Committee.
And
I do not find it necessary at this point. Thank you.
this is Mariah. I second it for sure.
So now let's have discussion. Jose, would you say more about?
Glad to. Basically, as I have been on the Public Art Committee for many years, I just find that to combine such big divisions or committees of our commission, it's putting too much on one bucket. It is, to me, public art has a lot of special projects. You know, we do get majoral commissions sometimes that involve a multi-panel review process from different bodies. I don't think everything that the public art group does, it's an actual grant. Some things are actually contracts. So I don't find it necessary to go putting apples and bananas in the same basket personally.
But Jose, you're addressing the merits of the issue. That's not what this is. So I agree and I understand what you're stating, and that has a lot of merit, but we're not there. This is just allowing your discussion to take place later. It is not on the merits. This is just allowing whether this is coming up. And there's a big difference because we're not voting on the merits here.
No, okay. So very simply, if you see my next one, my opinion is it's not necessary to go put that in our bylaws at this point. Whenever it comes in the future, you know, whoever commissioners are then they can discuss it. At this point, I do not think we need to put this placeholder in our bylaws, personally. I don't know if other people feel that way.
Let's hear the other points of view. I think your point of view is clear, Rona. Others?
Hi, it's Mariah. I feel the same way as well. I just don't think that it's necessary. And I think that the committees do very, very different things, have very different objectives, and are not sort of, you can't replace one with the other.
We cannot broach this when the time comes. Sorry.
Yeah, if I may, is there someone else that was speaking?
There.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree. I don't think we should do this. I don't think it's necessary, and I will not support including this. You know.
So Chairman Van Lee?
Yes.
Yeah, I think what people are struggling with, what I'm hearing is it just seems kind of arbitrary. And so if we're going to make a structural change of this nature, I think what I'm hearing is, should we give ourselves the flexibility that's non-specific to public art and grants, but rather allows us to have the kind of structural agility to make kinds of changes of this nature down the road without naming it out at this point if we're not prepared to take that action in this moment. That's what I'm hearing.
That's why I said we have three options.
Yeah, thank you.
And even though I'm not to support anything in particular, I'm just an empty chair who just lets people speak and vote otherwise. Given what it's taken for us to try to change the bylaws over these 8 years, it would be good if we wouldn't have to change the bylaws to make a change. So if we put in that generic ability, that would at least ease whoever later wanted to do something. But still, people may not want to do it now. I mean, I understand all sides of the argument, and I think we should just take the vote and see what's the will of the group here. But if there's any argument for it in a generic sense, it's so that we don't have to go through the rigmarole of rewriting the bylaws in order to take an action like that if future commissioners wanted to.
Reggie, can I say something too?
Can I say something too? This is Cece, Rona, when you're done.
Sure, of course. Do you want to go first? Go ahead, Cece.
Yeah, I actually respectfully disagree with all my previous fellow commissioners about whether we should separate this or not. And I also want to ask the question about whether we can have a discussion about the merits, because I actually feel very strongly that, to answer Maggie's point, like the reason it's public art and perhaps the only other applicable committee would be arts education, because when it comes to finances, like I think we need to look at these two things with respect to sort of the work that's being done as a committee and then the work that's being done through the committee and then vis-a-vis grants, actually the money going out, not necessarily grants committee. And I think the fact that we have separated public art from grants and having sort of two separate systems that aren't necessarily speaking to one another with respect to the finances is hugely problematic. I have felt that way as treasurer and as someone who's been sitting on the finance committee that any committee that has anything to do with the execution of grants at the commission should be all under one committee. Now, that's not to say that there can't be different commissioners on different grants doing sort of the work of the committee, but as a whole, as a sort of looking at these committees under one financial lens, I do think is very important. And the reason it might apply to public art and maybe arts education and grants writ large is because those specifically deal with applications, grants, and the giving out of money. The other committees, for instance, are sort of operational, systemic, like IDEA should be baked into the entire commission. So not just in areas of giving out finances, although that's a big one. And then as far as like executive finance governments, those are sort of internal. So, you know, I brought this up as a concern as well, and I understand there is an option to punt it down the road, but I also feel like if this is something that people do or are willing to take on, and I am one of them, I do think it warrants a real discussion. Because I think for too long, what has just been allowed to happen is problematic.
So, Rhoda, can I just ask a clarifying question? So is CC suggesting then that we amend this to consolidate the three entities now, the public education?
No, if I can clarify, I'm not asking because arts education, as Rona can attest, does follow the grants. It's not a whole separate section in the budget. You know, it's not its entire own thing where it kind of operates a little bit separately than the rest of the grants. Brian has his hand up, so he can probably clarify. Like, I just find that I have found that public art being able to operate in its own separate silo, like, you know, head to tail, has been a little bit of a problematic issue with respect to the rest of the finances. But that doesn't happen with arts education. There is its own committee, they do their own thing, but it is still wrapped into the grants budgeting process.
That's right.
Is it the process or?
No, wait. We had an order.
No,
It was
I'm
just.
sorry, Rona, but my hand had been up before Cece's, and it was not acknowledged.
I'm sorry,
I
Derek.
apologize. I'm having a hard time seeing on my screen. Whose hands are up?
Derek, I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I see Derek's hand is up, Brian's hand was up, and Cece's hand is up. Derek, why don't you proceed?
So my question was, with arts education, it is not part of the grants budget. It just operates on the same process as grants. Is that what you're saying, Cece?
Yes.
Okay, then why can't we have public art operate on the same process opposed to wrapping it into another area of grants that is high intense in volume as well? That I will, the process I think can be changed very easily. I don't agree with changing to fold into grants. I think they are very separate structures and animals.
No one is arguing that they're separate. I think that I would like to clarify, I'm not arguing that they're not separate. But with respect to the budget, they should not be separate because it's all money that's going out. We can't have one committee doing one thing while the rest of the programs are all following the same process. Like that doesn't sit right from just a fiduciary standpoint.
Which is why I asked you, was it the process?
Someone else is answering no for me. I think it is the process. So I think
that we could just change the process.
Hello.
Just a minute.
Hello. I appreciate the passion that we have around this topic, but we will not make much progress if we speak over each other and if we speak out of turn. So please, I promise I will let everyone have their say. I promise you. But please, let's try to follow the process. So Derek, will you finish making your point?
I am finished. I think if the process can be changed and you have 3 different buckets following the same process, financially, it is very easy to follow.
So let me go to Brian, and then Cece, if you still want to speak, I can come back to Cece. Rona, is your hand up as well?
Yes, my hand is up as well.
Let me go with Brian, Cece, Rona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just add one piece, the part that separates public art from, let's say, the arts education as well as grants is that it predominantly their projects are their budget is project based, and in addition to that, we try to if you will, they're different because we actually have to maintain the art as it pertains to the finances. So a lot of the budget is based around the actual portfolio. And actually the crafting of the artwork, which is very different in my experience thus far with how we issue the grants for all of the other cohorts or programs. So while Derek, I can see a compromise. If we're talking about from a grant perspective, just issuing grants, then perhaps maybe that should all come under one particular area. But for what I've seen in my 3 years, majority of the public arts funding has gone to specific projects and then the maintenance of the artwork as well.
And Mr. Chairman Manley, I need to ask a follow-up question of Brian.
I'll put you on the list. I think next is Cece.
Me.
Say something, Rona, and then I see that Jose's name is coming. So I'm just trying to be the referee here. So I promise.
Thank you. That's what we need. Thank you.
No, wait, is it my turn to speak, Reggie?
Nope. I think Cece was next. Cece, did you want to say something, or had you said?
It was Rona's turn, and I defer to Maggie because I'd like to hear her follow up as the chair.
Rona?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Brian a question.
Wait a minute, Maggie, you have to wait for the right turn after.
Rona, then Maggie, then Jose.
Okay, I want to agree with Cece. I think this is very important to have in here now. I think it's something that's been kicking on the table and people have brought up over the years. I have been treasurer on and off of this commission over 12 years. Cece has been treasurer. Grants and public art they should be dealing from a bucket of one. It doesn't mean they won't be segregated and have their own missions, but you cannot look at arts education, this I can promise you, with symposiums, with arts, with grants. Sometimes they get grants and sometimes they get money for other things. So that's a different bucket. And it's not just a procedure or a policy. And Quanice just asked, yes, we've looked at about 20 other different arts councils, and some don't even have public art. Some just have grants. Some have public art. So every council does what they do for their own benefit. Sometimes the government gives money to public art, so they're segregated entirely. But here, there's just no reason to have two different fiefdoms. We can have grants and public art act as one, yet there'd be two chairs and there'd be two mission statements and delineating separate goals, but not to have them come under one voice. Seems to me that just because we've had it, it doesn't mean it's good or we always have to have it. That just makes no sense. Just because something has existed doesn't mean it's good. So I would really urge people to vote in favor of keeping it, but we're not doing this on the merits right now, Cece, just to answer that question, because this is a question today only for a special meeting of whether we approve or not the bylaws. So the discussion on the merits has to be put in abeyance. We should vote on whether this resolution stays here or not for future use to discuss the merits.
Maggie?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Van Lee. I just wanted to ask Brian, because I was listening very keenly to Cece's feedback, and I want to understand a little more fully the fiduciary challenge that we're faced by the different processes. And so I wanted to get Brian's feedback as well on whether indeed he viewed the processes to be different and whether there was something there that this specific clause addresses that would remedy that challenge.
Brian, I'll let you answer. I think you answered already, but I'll let you answer.
I do see it as very different and very distinctly different ways that it's being handled between how the grants committee goes about the business of selecting or developing the criteria versus the criteria that's developed for the project-based grants and how the selection is done, the scope of what which artists can actually be eligible for the grants and so on and so forth. I want to just remind everyone, like I said, there's a large portion of this money that the Public Arts Committee uses is towards the preservation as well as the creation of the arts, which is very different from the grants that we're giving out based off of capacity building, capital infrastructure, and things of that nature. So this has more of a finite way to measure an accurate way for us to disseminate the funding to public art. And it's for that reason, since I've come here, I've made it one of my missions to set up a program where we can actually see and measure the cost and it be very transparent to our taxpayers as to what we're using our public art dollars for. It's a lot easier to do it that way.
Brian, are you in favor of keeping it as is or changing it? And do you see a fiduciary challenge? That's my question.
I only see the fiduciary challenge from the way that the agency has handled grant funding. Okay. From my perspective, I think that we do need to revisit that. But from the actual, I do really strongly feel that public art should remain separate. But for the sake of what Rona just said, what does it hurt to keep that statement in there for future consideration?
So then, Chairman Van Lee, I'd like at the appropriate point to make a motion that we make the language non-specific. Again, I feel like we're parachuting in on one structural change for two committees. Why don't we have the flexibility to make the changes we need for years moving forward? And so my motion would be to make it not specific to public arts and to grants, but rather to put in a clause that would allow for us to have the flexibility to vote on any future structural change as it relates to those committees.
So
I second that.
We have a motion and a second on the floor already. We have to close on that before we entertain a new motion. But your point, I think, is well taken. According to my machine, Jose, Gretchen, and Derek all have hands raised. Are those for now, or is that stuff that hasn't been taken down from when you spoke before? Jose, did you want to say something?
Yes, yes. I totally do not find it necessary to put this clause in this bylaws. Whenever the time comes, I respect my colleagues, and I mean, the statement has been made that this has been going on for years, 10 years. I would like to ask staff if they have heard this. To be honest, until we were talking about these bylaws and our advantage. That was the first time in public art that I ever heard about this combining. I think it's two separate funds, two separate missions. I don't think we even need to go this route right now. So whoever is next.
Okay,
Reggie.
Gretchen, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, the reason you haven't heard it, Jose.
I was asking Gretchen.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Gretchen, did you want to say something?
Yes, I did. Just one specific example that happened this year that we did correct.
Hey, Reggie, I can't hear Gretchen.
If you're not speaking, could you please mute your line? That might be the issue. If you're not speaking, please mute your line.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
One example that happened this past year that almost got us into quite a bit of trouble publicly, the task force recommended that we use the organizational demographic overview, which Commission voted on unanimously to include in our grants. Well, we included it in the traditional grants, but it was not included in the public art grants because I guess someone made a decision not to do that. So that's just one example that happened, but I think it can be rectified by working more closely together. Anything should be done right now, but what happens amendment or this change rather in the bylaws is that it gives you the ability, whether it's tomorrow, years from now, to combine committees if you choose to do so. It takes too much to change the bylaws again if we end up having to do that.
Good. Derek, did you have something to say?
No, Brian already spoke to the preservation portion of it. And like I said, I don't agree with combining it, and I don't like putting things in the bylaws that aren't relevant to work that we're doing now. I don't like placeholders.
Okay. And Rona, did you now want to say something as well?
I wanted to just address Jose's comment. I have heard about this for years, and Cece and I have heard about this for years because both of us have been on the finance committee, and that's where it has come up most. And it's also come up in the grants committee. And Gretchen just gave an excellent example that if things were put together, some of these issues that were not great for our public perception and our work would happen. So I really ask you, if we could just leave this the way it is, and if we, right now, we can discuss this at the next meeting. And this is just something that we don't have to, as Gretchen said, redo the bylaws.
So it seems to me, all arguments have been put on the table. We can keep repeating our points of view, which I don't think would be very constructive. I would like now to take a vote on the motion. The motion was to remove this from the proposed bylaws. At this point, it was moved in second. So I'd like to vote on that first and then see where that puts us. Is that fair? Jeff,
yes.
No, I don't understand. To remove what?
There's a motion on the table that right now, what is in the draft that the bylaws committee presented to us would say that we would have the opportunity to combine these two committees at some point. The motion on the table now is that be removed. It has been moved in second, that be removed, such that we would not have any impact on any of the current committees to combine any. That's what's on the table now, and that's what I want to take a vote on. Is it, you understand, Cora?
Yes.
Good. So.
I second.
Well, it's been moved in second. So I'll go through the list. If you are in favor of a motion to remove what is in here now, that says there's a possibility of combining those two committees. Stacy? Cora?
No.
Maggie?
I'm voting to strike it.
So you're voting yes then?
Yes.
Yeah, because I also have a motion on the table.
No, if we can take your vote, we have to finish this motion. Then we can take your motion later. But for now, we're voting on, do we want to strike this clause about combining committees now or not?
Can I ask a question, Reggie?
Yes, yes.
To Maggie's point, if we strike it, then we can put another motion on to.
Yes, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
We can amend until we've resolved all amendments.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
to
let
be-
me ask the question. It doesn't make any sense to me. If you vote no to move it, if you vote yes to move it, then what are you going to come back with? You said you don't want change. I don't get it. I don't understand where the confusion is.
Not necessarily. Somebody could come back with Maggie's proposal, which is that we make it general. It doesn't say specifically public arts and grants. It's a general opportunity to combine. That may or may not make a difference in the mind of the voters. We can only vote on one motion at a time.
So one is specific, one is to strike it. The other one is strike if it is specific, and the other one is the flexibility to keep it in there so we can have flexibility if we want to do it later, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
No, to be clear, in both cases, it's the flexibility to do it later. We're not voting, no one has proposed that we combine them. The only proposal we have the opportunity to combine them.
But this recommendation right here is to eliminate the flexibility.
Well, to eliminate the language that says those two are combined.
Right, so you're eliminating the flexibility of combining them later. Yeah, okay.
Combining these two.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So I'll go back. Are we clear on what we're voting on? Because that's important. So I'll go back again. Stacy's not here. Quorum?
No, I don't want to strike it.
Okay, Maggie?
Yes, because I'd like to have a new amendment.
Juanice?
No.
Rona?
No.
Natalie?
No.
Kimber? Marianne?
No.
Mariah?
Yes, I want to remove it.
Cece?
No.
Carla? Carla?
Yes, I'm here. No.
Hector?
No.
Jose?
Yes, strike.
Gretchen?
No.
Derek?
Yes, to strike it.
So help me, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 no's and 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. So that motion does not pass.
So it stays in.
It stays in for now. So I suspect Maggie or someone wants to make a different motion.
I just don't understand why we're parachuting in and making a detailed change like this. If we're talking about bylaws, I feel like we should create the flexibility to combine any group, and then it shouldn't be specific to grants and to public art. And so because of all of the things that people have shared tonight, both for and against, my motion is that we make the language more generic and non-specific to public arts and grants. That's my motion. Do I have a second?
A second?
Second
I'm
it.
sorry, Maggie, can you say it one more time, please? What are you motioning?
My motion is to keep Rona's,
Anyone
Rona,
who's not speaking, please mute your line, please. Sorry, Maggie.
thank you, Chairman Bentley. The motion is to keep the clause in, but not make it specific to public arts and grants. In other words, I think there's merit, as Rona said, in having flexibility as we move forward to have the governance framework in place to combine any committee that we so choose. We could change the formation over time and have new committees that would be joined later down the road. So instead of making it specific to grants and public art, I would like to have the ability to make it the clause general and not name those two existing committees.
Maggie, respectfully, this is Cece. I think the reason I'm bringing it up as a specific issue because it specifically applies to public art. I understand what you're saying in trying to make it general, but I think generality is just kicking the can down the line. And for me personally, the issue right now is about the bifurcation of public art with grants. And if we're going to be serious about inclusion, equity, it starts here. Because for a very long time, this is problematic. And it's problematic in a dollars and cents sign, not just like the committees do two different work. And I think the people who are maintaining that they shouldn't be separated, like I'm not suggesting they shouldn't be separated from like the work that's being done, but the fact that they are in two separate buckets of finances that operate separately is problematic, and it speaks directly to equity. And there's a situation, well, there's a situation that has stayed with me for many, many years because we voted on something. I'll be very general, but we voted on something that was recommended by the Public Art Committee that was in direct disalignment with what we do with every other grant. And it was pushed through because there was an argument that public art is separate. And that has never wavered from me as something that was just patently wrong and something that we can't continue to do if we're going to say that we're trying to be equitable or inclusive or have access. Like, this speaks directly to a sort of fundamental issue. So I do believe that if we don't change the bylaws are supposed to speak to who we are as an organization in many ways. So if we're not going to discuss it here, then I would really urge that we do have this conversation, because 5 years I've been on this commission and I've been asking about this. And as Rona has said, and other people, it's been many, many years. And I disagree that it hasn't been a problem for many, many years, because it has. And so if we're not going to address it today on the merits, but I think to your specific point, like, I don't think we need to get into an argument about or a discussion about how to make it flexible for everything, because what you're not going to improve finance with governance. You know, you're not going to do that. But the issue today is this very problematic separation of the two committees from a financial standpoint, and it has rippling effects. And so I feel very, very strongly about this. So if we're not going to discuss the actual language, then or solving an actual issue with, I don't want us to get lost in like, well, let's just, I hear like we're just trying to appease everyone by having a general language when the issue is very problematic.
Cece?
Yes.
I just want to respond, because I think, we started this conversation with clear direction from Rona and others that we weren't debating the merits. And so while I hear everything that you're saying, and I don't disagree with it, what I'm saying is, can we please, I think it's inclusive. In the spirit of inclusion, we haven't had an opportunity as a group to discuss this in detail, to explore it, to look at past practice, to see where there are challenges. But similarly, we haven't heard from other groups that may want to combine in other areas.
Yeah.
So my point is, this does not detract from solving the problem you're outlining. It simply gives us the flexibility to do it in various areas down the road, so we don't have to revisit the governance bylaws every time. So I'm not saying not to adopt what you're suggesting. On the contrary, I think there's great merit in revisiting it, as I've shared with others. What I'm saying is, why don't we give that opportunity to everybody so we don't have to revisit the bylaws down the road? That's my point.
If I may, we're a little out of order because we have a motion. It's not been seconded before we went to discussion, but we started discussion.
I second it.
It was seconded.
I seconded it, but Cece jumped in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Okay, good. So we were discussing. Any other points of discussion?
Yes. Can I just say something, Reggie?
Yes, please.
Okay. Maggie, with standing committees, if you're saying we don't have the flexibility, first of all, Cece made some excellent points, and please consider them, how public art and grants have had some major conflicts. And I remember more than Cece, other examples where public art has pushed something through and they were in direct conflict with some other grants that were being approved. Secondly, when we have other new standing committees in the future, they all have to go through the same, it's an amendment process to add a standing committee. So it's not that you can't put another committee on, but you are kicking the can down the road, because we have to have an amendment for that anyway. Let's just deal with this one problem, which 2 treasurers over 10 years have seen, and just let this be. And we're not, as Cece would like, I understand that, but we're not doing the merits. Let's discuss this, and if something else happens to come down the road, you can do it. Then you can add it. but why make it so general that this has absolutely no teeth? And that's what you're doing. You're
Because
making
if it
this.
applies to this, if it applies to the overall agency, and I have the exact opposite experience that Cece had, where we did the same thing on the grant side. So when we talk about idea two, I don't want people to start putting this as part of their package to get something into the bylaws. What I want them to do is think that ideas relates to the entire commission and everything we do, not just public art or not just grants. It's everything we do. So I don't like that whitewashing everything with one brush in order to get your point across or deciding what we said. Maggie has a point. It could be, you know, there are people who are on this board 12 years or longer and, you know, live through the votes of all of those other things. So I think making it general allows us the flexibility to do just that, combine as we move forward.
Wait, can I say something? I'd like to say something. Because I see this as a shift. I see this as a shift of attitude, what Derek just said. But bottom line is sometimes you have to pay attention to history. You have to listen. You got to know the nuances, and you weren't there. I'm hearing 2, 3 people say it has been a problem down through the years. And these are people who are directly involved with these processes. And so I think I'm going to trust their judgment that this will better promote equity and clarity and collaboration to combine these two committees. I think it's a good idea because I trust the history. I trust the work that Rona just did on it. And I believe that the goal, the intended goal is to keep things moving in a much more organized, professional way and include more equity. So I'm going to trust the history of the people.
Now, Commissioner Berry, though, we have staff people that say that it wasn't an issue. So I'm just trying to hear everyone. That's all. I mean, I think everyone has an opportunity to offer a perspective. So Brian and others have said that there was some merit in having them separate. So I'm trying to fully understand the people that are in the. I'm sorry. Am I able to finish my sentence?
I was just going to correct a misstatement. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're right.
Yeah, well, don't interrupt me because that's rude. So what I'm saying is that we have staff people who are living this day to day, who are in the trenches, and we're just going to say that their perspective doesn't matter because I don't think that's fair either.
Well, once again, let's clarify. We're having 2 discussions. One discussion is over whether we should put into the bylaws now the possibility, the opportunity to combine specific committees, general committees, whatever. The other is whether we should do it now. And we're not prepared to discuss whether we should do it. And I understand those who say generic revisions don't mean anything. I understand that as well. But I just want to make sure we aren't confused. The motion on the table is that we now put into the bylaws the opportunity to combine any number of committees at some later date. It's been moved in second. The discussion is around that topic, and we should take a vote. And if we then end up with needing to have more of a discussion, we can, but I don't want to conflate various points of view. And I would invite us to, in spite of our passions around this topic, to be respectful in the conversation with others and to really listen, give people a chance to finish their points. And if I'm behaving unrespectful, please put me in check as well. But I'd like for everybody to get their views out because this evidently is important to people. And when I first arrived and I did my one-on-ones with commissioners, this topic came up and the arguments were across the board. Before I even arrived, people were telling me about this combination. So it is an important topic. It's important to the commission. It's important to those on this conversation. So I just want to treat you with the right level of respect. So is there any point on this motion that has not been made? We don't need to make the point again, but any point that has not been made that needs to be made? If not, then I will move to the vote. And once again, the motion on the table, and maybe I should let Maggie repeat it since she made the motion.
It's simply to not make the motion specific to public arts and grants, but to allow the commission to have the structural flexibility to make further changes to any committee, including grants and public art down the road, and to have a full and robust discussion of it, I think is critically important. And I don't think that we've been given the opportunity to do that today. I don't think we've discussed it on the merits in the depth that I'd like to see it. So that is my motion.
Okay, I'm going to go through the roll call. Stacy? In favor or not? Stacy's not here. Cora,
No.
Maggie,
Yes.
Juanice. I think Juanice said she had to leave. Rona,
No.
excuse me, Natalie,
No.
Kimber, she had to leave. Marianne,
Yes.
Mariah,
Yes.
CC,
No.
Carla.
I'll leave it as it is.
So is that a no?
No.
Hector,
No,
Jose,
Yes.
Gretchen,
No.
Derek.
Yes.
So on the yeses, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the noes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that motion doesn't pass. So to where we are is we're back to the original suggestion from the Bylaws Committee that has now had 2 motions for amendments, neither of which passed. Is there an additional amendment? Are we ready to vote on? I guess we're not, we vote at the end, right?
I don't think we vote. I think we have to move on to the next section now.
Right. So so Jeff, am I abiding by Robert's rules?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So that was a robust conversation. Thank you. On to Article 7.
Article 7 is the administration of the commission. The first section talks about, well, actually, it's just the executive director, and section is one section. It's only one, and that's code 39205A. And it tells us how the executive director is appointed. And then the second section is the duties of the executive director, which ties into what we voted on before in the legislation, which we amended. And Jeff read to us in the very beginning that Jose kindly brought up about authority and purpose. So this ties into that, and these are taken from the same language. So if there's any discussion or amendment about these 5 statements, let's hear it now.
Any amendments? We'll move on to Article 8.
Wait,
Sorry.
one second. Sorry, is this the section where we talk about the executive committee?
No,
Okay, thank you.
no, this is just the executive director, Jose, and her
Okay.
responsibilities
Thank you.
as dictated. Sure,
Thank
you
you.
brought up,
Appreciate Thank you.
we changed,
Article
we
8.
changed,
Article 8.
Thank you.
May I ask? I'm sorry.
Article 8 is
I'm sorry.
parliamentary,
Anyone have a question about 7?
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry,
didn't-
Mr. Chairman. Yes, I had one quick question. Does it have to, as it pertains to section 5 or requirement number 5, report on a monthly basis as needed, the 44 task force recommendations, is that just going to live in perpetuity? And then how is that disseminated throughout? Is there any requirements as it pertains to how it correlates to finances? Because I know that there was a part that Rona had put in regarding the day-to-day treasurer and how the treasurer is a liaison and reports,
That's
gives a full budget or financial oversight report. And so the question I have is really with regards to the 44 task force recommendations. Is there a requirement for that to be just to the chairperson? I'm not understanding because there's a bit
I'm
of a
not understanding your question. Can you please?
well, okay, because what I'm really getting at, Rona, is the task force recommendations and how they're okay. I'm the first part is I'm really trying to understand why that's actually part of the bylaws. Only because once those task force recommendations are achieved, then what happens? Does that just sit
Well,
in?
they were a part of if you look at number 5, they were added as part of the strategic plan. So it's not limited to the task force and the 44 recommendations. It doesn't say in addition to. So those were just two examples of monthly reports that were inclusive of the strategic plan and the task force. But as I understand it, you and the treasurer were going to go ahead and give detailed reports on everything, and that would include monies needed for the strategic plan and monies needed to implement the task force recommendations, because this said including but not limited to. It's not, it's, yeah. So we gave you more latitude by saying including but not limited to. So if there are other things you want to bring up, you certainly can.
Okay.
Rona and Reggie, if I may. Sorry.
Well, wait, I have to finish. Are you finished with, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm done. Thank you.
What's your point, Jose?
Sorry, Reggie, in all the discussion about the public art and the grant, I missed, and we did not do the executive committee. And that is page 8, section 3, executive committee.
We did that.
didn't-
We went through that.
No, we started with the public art and the combination. We got into that hoopla, and then we jumped to the others. So we didn't go through that specific section. Sorry.
But I asked if everyone had comments, and the only comments people made were on that first section. Let's finish this, and if you want to go back.
I definitely would. Thank you.
Okay, but let's just finish this up because it's the next two are very easy. Is that okay,
you.
Jose?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other questions or discussion on 8, on 7.
No. Talk about 8. We didn't talk about 8.
I'm sorry?
We didn't talk about 8. We were about
I'm
to
sorry.
talk about 8, and then Brian raised his question. So let's cover 8.
I meant 7. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Okay.
We finished 7, so I'm talking about 8.
Good.
And there's only one section which talks about that we have to use Robert's Rules of Orders as our procedure. If it doesn't conflict with applicable DC laws and rules and the commission's bylaws and or special rules. And amendment Article 9.
I just want to ask something.
Sure.
My understanding was that Robert's Rules of Order prevails over our rules and the board's rule.
No, it doesn't. When there's a discrepancy, you always look to the law first, the organization's bylaws, and then if there's no delineation of anything about a specific issue, you go to Robert's Rules.
Well, that's what Article 8 says. It says we'll do Robert rules other than 1, applicable District of Columbia.
That's right.
Laws, 2, the commission's bylaws. So we go with the law first, we go with the bylaws second, and then if those don't clarify, we go to Robert's rules. That's
Okay.
what
I thought Robert's Rules of Order came before. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Article 9 is just.
Any amendments to 8? Okay, now let's go to 9.
This is just amendments, and we're saying that these bylaws can be amended at any regular or special meeting of the board by a 2/3 vote, provided that the amendment has been submitted in writing 2 weeks prior to the meeting. And what we wanted to do is avoid everyone getting it the night before and not having a chance to think about it.
Any amendments to that? That's the last article? Ron, is that the last article? So there's a remaining issue around the executive committee from Jose.
I don't know where that, what are you referring to, Jose?
Jose, you're muted. You're muted.
I think it's section 3.
Yeah, it is section 3. It is on page 8 if you're following, section 3, executive committee and its powers. My amendment is I move to strike the executive committee altogether.
What? Okay.
I need a second and then we can discuss as I've been taught.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second?
It's
Is there a second?
Mariah.
Okay, it's moved in second.
Okay.
Discussion.
If I may, and whoever has an opinion on this, I've been in the commission for quite a while. I also was part of the executive committee, and at no point there is a little section that actually bothered me, which says blah, 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 blah. The executive committee shall have power to act on behalf of the board and report to the board or at the following meeting. The way I understand it, and this is on the Open Meetings Act, it is also on the Robert's Rule of Order. We cannot have a committee making decisions and then just informing the rest of the commissioners what has been decided. In other words, in this day and age, when we're experts in Zoom and we can have a meeting in 48 hours, I think anything that is discussed as an executive committee, I mean, whatever, behind closed doors, whatever you want to call it. I trust my fellow commissioners, but I don't feel that that kind of power is warranted. I mean, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see that where it's necessary at this point. Anyone else?
Other discussion? Rhonda?
Jeff and I have looked at, I'd say 20 to 30 different bylaws of nonprofits, of arts organizations, of councils, of arts organizations who are not commissions. Everyone, the executive committee is basically something that no one omits anymore this day and age. In the past, yes, but not in the last 10 years. The committee has to have the ability to do something. And what you're saying, it precludes basically the chair's ability to call for something of his standing committee chairs to do something. And no one is going to do anything that needs a full committee vote. But you have to be able to move an organization forward quickly, and an executive committee is critical for that. I just don't know. The one thing that was put in here that I do want, Jose, I'd like you to look at, it says the committee shall have the authority to approve expenditures no more than 3,500 for arts and humanities purposes. And the reason for that is sometimes
Here in New York during a musical tour of the US has been found in.
Please mute your line if you're not speaking.
That was put in there because sometimes you need $1,000 for a symposium. You need transportation for somebody to come in. This has happened in the past, I can tell you, in arts ed, and it was really hard just to get the money, and it had to be done through a back door, which was unfortunate. This goes back years at the time. But other than that, there's no reason. If you sit on a committee, Jose, and you elect a chair, and that chair of the standing committee comes forth in an executive committee, we're not just picking willy-nilly to decide things that have to be done on the spur of the moment. There's no reason not to have it. I mean, it just takes away the smooth governance of any organization, and that I can tell you is a fact. That's not just hearsay, that's a fact.
Any other discussion points? Anyone else who has not spoken on this topic?
This is Derek. I've had my hand up. I think that is only Rona's point of view. And as you say that you'll only make financial decisions for 3,500, you as an executive committee can make a decision that could be thousands of dollars. And we're saying as the board, if we are board and all equal commissioners, we want the ability to know how that affects our wards and our constituents and not have a smaller group be able to make that decision. So I think it should be stricken.
The 3,500 or the executive committee? I'm not following you, Derek. I'm sorry.
It's the power of the executive committee. So that entire section 3, I agree with striking it.
And Reggie, my understanding is that executive committee, and you're an expert at this because you have helped many organizations, usually exists when there's a very large board that meets quarterly. In this case, the commission, we're a few, and we meet every month, and we are a small group. And if we need to call for a meeting where we need to make a decision, we do not need that extra layer of an executive committee to meet and then inform us of whatever. With Zoom meeting, we can meet quickly and get a quorum. So I would, my vote was to strike that entire section. Thank you. If anybody else has a support.
Any other comments?
I've got my hand up, or had my hand up. It's Mariah, and I definitely think that this puts power in a lot of power in the hands of too few people. So I would vote to delete this section.
I'd like to say something. I'm trying to see, if you don't mind, the statement one that Derek made, that this was only Rona's opinion. That's not true, and you don't know that, so you shouldn't say those things. But number two, I'm trying to understand what is really the problem here with having a group of people that can make expedited decisions that, in my history, my short history of almost 2 years being on this board, things get bogged down in so much bureaucracy and this, that, and the third. And to me, what I'm seeing Rona trying to do, and the committee that worked with her, is to expedite, make things more flexible and more easily, passed. And from anybody to say power in the hands of a few, have not obviously been on this commission since I've been on this commission, because when I first came on here, it was the hands of 2 people who were making all the decisions. So this is a more democratic way to do it, because hands of power, all hands and a few powers, is what I walked into this commission watching. And so what I'm hearing now is we'll have a process that more people can weigh in on things in an expedited manner. I don't see where the problem is there.
Other comments?
I agree with
And Cora, just so you know, I can decide that when she makes a statement that is her own opinion. If you agree with her opinion, that's fine. But I can say it's not speaking for everyone, and it is her opinion since it came out of her mouth.
That's not what you said. You said she's the only one who thought that. You don't have the right to say that because you don't know.
No, that's not what I said.
That is what you said.
You should listen to a little more.
I heard it.
Okay, here we go, kids.
No, I'm fine. I heard it.
Okay. Did someone else want to
hear
discussion?
I heard what you said.
Did someone else?
Reggie, this is Cece. Can I, was there someone else with their hand? I can't see.
Marianne had her hand up.
No, if you could just add me to the queue, then Reggie, I'd like to say something.
Yes, and I apologize. I'm just having a hard time seeing hands up with my computer. So Marianne, and then Cece.
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, so Cece.
So I should just clarify, I did sit on the bylaws committee and went through this with other people on the committee, and this was a topic of discussion, and I just want to co-sign what Rona said about the executive committee is a committee that's decided by the commission, so it isn't just a few people that have been randomly selected by the chair of the commission, which is how committee heads were decided before. So I think the fact that it's already a more egalitarian process does make me feel more comfortable about having an executive committee. As far as to Mrs. Berry's point about, putting the hands of, she's right. There were a few people who were deciding everything previously. And so I think that argument is, I don't really agree with that argument as for why we shouldn't have this. And the truth of the matter is, I think an executive committee isn't the worst idea, because anytime we trigger any sort of quorum for discussions, it becomes a public meeting. And, I think sometimes certain discussions should be had in private. I know we are a public body, and I'm not saying that this is to not be transparent, but like we've showed our asses, for lack of a better word, excuse my French, a number of times, and that has not helped our how do I say it? It hasn't helped our cause with the community to see how inefficient or how incapable we are of resolving certain things. And I think if there's a way for us to do that, that's still transparent and that has the buy-in from the rest of the committee, I'm not against that. And Rhoda knows, like, I ask all the questions and I ask for all the scenarios as to how this could go sideways. And for whatever it's worth, I was happy with the explanation that she and Reggie gave. But just so you know, yeah, like we went through this whole thing, and anytime there was an issue that might have appeared problematic, like it was discussed at length. So for whatever that's worth to everyone else.
And if I may?
Yes, Jose?
Yeah, my situation, Reggie, is the following, that if there's an executive committee like we have done in the past, we can make as an executive committee, whoever those people are, and that to me is narrowing it down to fewer people trying to make decisions for a very small group to start with. And I think everybody can realize that. One thing is, if that executive committee makes recommendations, not so much as decisions. That's where my problem is in making decisions and just informing all of us. And it does go, and Jeff, if you can chime in about the Open Meetings Act, the Roberts Rule, where do we fall in this? Because we are a small body and we are more united, so we can meet at any time virtually. We're more united. So to me, is putting the decision in a select group that are the executive committee versus all of us having a say and a vote and a seat at the table, because we can always meet and discuss things. Thank you.
Other comments? I'll make a comment here, and I haven't made a lot of comments in this conversation. One of the reasons that I felt this was important is, one, I've sat on many, many, many boards, and I still sit on a bunch of boards, and every board has an executive committee because you need that in order to make decisions in an expeditious way, et cetera. But importantly, the point that Cece raised is because of our public meeting requirements. If we have over 8 commissioners, it has to be a public meeting. There are conversations we need to have that we don't want to have openly. And since each of the chairs would be elected by the members of the commission themselves, it's not as though it's a hand-picked group. It's not as though it's a cabal or anything like that. So I thought there would be a comfort that restricting some decisions to a small group that is representative of the body because the body voted them in would make sense. I would not follow my sword over this, but I find it strange that we would be one of the very few organizations, large or small, that does not have an executive committee. Changing some of the powers and that sort of stuff, yes, but to completely wipe out the notion of executive committee is a bit bizarre to me.
Reggie, I think we've always been able to go into executive session, and I think we should continue to do that because there are times when there are personnel issues that we cannot discuss publicly. And
Yes.
I think there may be other issues relating to maybe a specific grant or a specific organization that we do not want to have recorded as a public meeting and sometimes we have the press sitting in the meeting and we have other individuals. I think we should maintain the ability to go into executive session for specific confidential issues.
Reggie, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Marianne, you're exactly right, but the DC law, as Jeff has pointed out to me, is very specific about when and how we can go into executive session. And I think for personnel issues, that is one. And for training, I believe we can do some things like that as well. But I think that doesn't impinge on an executive committee's ability to make decisions, not just to recommend to the full commission, because then you have to have a committee recommending to a commission, but for emergency and dire situations and situations that just come up that need deciding, we should have both. We should have executive committee and we should have executive session. They're two different things. But I do agree with your point that we should always keep executive session handy.
Can I ask a question as it pertains to executive committee and executive sessions? Is there ever a circumstance where staff is allowed to participate in those, or is it strictly the information is disseminated to the committee chair, who then in turn goes to the executive committee?
That would be at the discretion of the board when they go into executive session.
And I only ask that from a perspective, if there was ever a material change in the agency's financial forecast or something to that effect, it might be something that may need to be taken up immediately. And so I just was wondering, based on how the rules are set up right now, it doesn't appear that that would be something that staff would participate in.
Jeff, is there a way of making, or myself making an amendment where it's about changing the powers of the executive committee, that it can occur, but just change the powers that it has? In other words, not to be able to make decisions and just inform us. Please help us get some clarification.
I think probably would be easiest if you just withdraw your amendment and make another one that's more specific to what you're trying to do.
Okay, thank you, Cora. I love the chirp. So I can do an amendment. I mean, it would be to change instead of striking the entire thing, is to have the not decision-making power that is stated as it is right now.
So before we do that, though, the person that seconded, would you also be okay with withdrawing the motion, or do you want to proceed with a vote on that motion? I can't remember who seconded.
It takes unanimous consent to withdraw. So if everyone's okay with it, then it can come out.
So specifically, the person that seconded, are you okay with it? Jeff, remind us who seconded Jose's motion.
I think it was Derek.
Derek,
I think it was Mariah,
Mariah.
but if it was me, then I do, but I'm pretty
me.
sure it was Mariah.
Yes,
Mariah.
are you okay with withdrawing it?
with withdrawing it to do,
With withdrawing Jose's motion, and he'll come back with a revised motion.
okay, yes, I am.
So anybody have any opposition to that? Okay, so Jose, now you can restate your motion.
Mainly is to, and Jeff can explain a little more about the duties of the committee when it comes to decisions and versus recommendations. Basically, it's the section that says executive committee shall have the power to act on behalf of the board and report to the board at the following CAH meeting. In other words, the wording would be executive committee shall have the power to meet, have form recommendations and report those recommendations to the board at the following meeting where it would be voted. In other words, I find that to be a little more democratic than the executive committee meeting, making decisions and just informing us. So Jeff, if there's a way of, or somebody, of refining those words, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't want to send us down the rat hole, but would you also attach to that motion excluding the $3,500 expenditure, or is that okay?
I would probably include that in that it should be a recommendation, not a decision. Thank you.
So Jeff, would you restate the motion for us?
And what did previous bylaws say, Jeff? That's what I'm trying. I never have heard of that kind of power to have, where we should share more of the responsibility because we're a small group. Thank you.
So I think the easiest motion would probably be to just strike out these two sentences. The XCOM has the power to act on behalf of the board, and strike out the sentence, the committee shall have the authority to approve an expenditure. And then just insert at the end, the executive committee will report and make recommendations to the board as needed.
I agree.
That's a motion. So Marion, you second.
Yes.
Discussion. Any discussion about this?
Chairman Van Lee?
Yes.
I'm just struggling a bit, so I'm hoping you can help me understand then, what would the role of the executive committee be with those clauses stricken? So it's just I'm trying to understand what's the specific role and responsibility of the executive committee if we strike those?
I mean, I can hypothesize that deep topics that need discussion, that don't want to be discussed in public forum, be discussed fully by that committee. Those members are representing the committees that they chair, and the recommendation that then comes to the board is better thought out and better representative and would expedite the discussion once we bring it to the public. I'm hypothesizing, but that's one.
That's very helpful. I was losing track. Thank you.
Other discussion?
This is just a question, if I may. Wouldn't that kind of nullify the function of having committee chairs anyway, if everything is going to be decided by the committee of the whole?
You asking me or you're asking the committee, the bylaws committee?
What I'm saying is that if you don't have a committee, an executive committee, what would be the point of having committee chairs? I mean, if you don't have an executive committee of the complete board, why would be the point of having committee chairs? What would committee chairs report to and to whom?
Yeah, but clearly the grants committee has to do its grants work. It needs a chair. The public arts committee needs to do its work. It needs a chair. So the notion of those committees having chairs certainly makes sense because that work can't be done by the entire commission. And they bring recommendations to the full board and vote on it. So to me, this is just another level of decision around a topic that would bring a recommendation to the full board.
This is Cece. Is the problem with the actual expenditure portion of the $3,500? I'm just trying to understand materially what the issue is with this section, because you're basically saying that the executive committee will make up of the chairs of each committee. That I don't think anyone has an issue with that as far as I'm hearing. So it sounds like the actual issue is about the approving of the expenditure. Is that it? I just want to know what exactly the problem is before we just like wholesale delete sections of the language.
Is that a question to me?
Or whoever has an issue with the section, like what is materially the issue? Like what sentence specifically? Because I think it's not helpful to say we should just delete the whole thing.
Well, no, we passed that.
We're past that.
Taken away.
Right, but my question is it the money part?
No, as I understand it, the issue was the power of the executive committee over the entire commission. And so the two sentences that gave them powers, a power to make a decision and then report it to the board as opposed to get approval, and the power to spend $3,500 and then report it to the commission as opposed to the commission making the decision. Those are the two lines that came as issues. So the existence of the executive committee seems to be okay with everyone. The power was the question.
Yes, that's correct as far as I am.
What's on the screen, right?
You'll see these changes, highlights.
That's correct.
They're correct.
Other discussion?
The only thing I would have to offer, Reggie, would be that the 3,500 might be problematic only from the perspective that when the agency puts forth a request for the expenditure, it has to be supported and processed through the OCFO, and that's always been a process.
Excuse me, Reggie, this is Gretchen. I am at a doctor's appointment and my doctor just walked in, so I can't hang on any longer. If you need my vote, please call me back.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. I'm sorry, did you finish, Brian?
Yes, sir. Like I said, as it pertains to the $3,500 expenditure, the only thing that I would offer is that it might be problematic in the way that it's stated here, only because as it goes right now, any expenditures is going to the office of the chief financial officer for approval, especially at $3,500. That's all going to go through district system, so it would have to get support from the OCFO prior to actually happening. So
Can
that's
I ask, Brian, what is the
Yes, ma'am.
number then that you don't have to get? Because like when we needed $1,000 for a symposium and we needed to pay transportation, that didn't have to go through the CFO. That just came out of, we had extra funding and we took it out of contracts. So what would be a number that would be appropriate instead of 3,500?
So it's not so much the money amount as it is the nature of the expenditure, Rona.
So
And
what would
even
be-
with
okay,
even
okay.
with that circumstance that you just outlined, where you're going to a symposium, it still would require advance notification, us processing it through the OCFO. But the point that I'm making is it's still subject to someone else's approval prior to the expenditure happening. And so what I read from this is that the XCOM would be able to engage in this expenditure without anybody else's approval.
No, I don't think, I think we were looking for, I'm sorry, can you just, whoever is mute? Brian, I was just saying, would it be better then to say with the approval of the treasurer and the finance person, or how would you reword this just to make it more in line with what our laws are then? That's the question I'm asking specifically.
I'm sorry to answer your question with a question, but the question I'm asking you is there truly a need to legislate it or put it in our bylaws, as opposed to just making sure that it's funding that's set aside and formulated into the agency's budget?
The problem is it's very hard to formulate if you need something for grants, events, programs, training. You don't know in advance what you're going to do. And if you do a specific bucket, it's going to have to stay in that bucket. So I was just thinking there could be a general bucket that could use very small amounts. And then, and a lot of executive committees and a lot of commissions now do this, because they don't have to, have a big public meeting about it. And it just goes for very small amounts. So I'm thinking, is there a way we can make this work through your eyes?
I'm
Well,
thinking
actually, I was gonna say, the motion on the table now is to strike that, and if that motion carries, we don't have to have this conversation. If it doesn't carry, then we can come back to Brian and you can give us guidance on what is in line with the statute. Is that fair?
that's more than one way to skin that cat, Rona. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Reggie. I'm happy with Brian's answer.
That's called Texas diplomacy. So any other conversations on this? The motion on the table is to strike the power around the executive committee making decisions and then reporting it to the board, and the power around expenditures of any amount. And what we added in was that the executive committee shall report and make recommendations to the board on any decisions they make as an executive committee. So I will go through the vote.
Before you go, I just want one clarification. So the change that says make recommendations, right?
Yes.
That's a change. Okay, I got it.
Reggie,
Yes.
Reggie, before we go on to the vote, can Jeff please explain, so we're all on the same page, what the role of the committees are, and it also related to the Roberts rule? Because like that, we understand what the committees are doing, and then we can all go into this vote a little bit better informed, please. Thank you.
Well, the roles of the committee are what are defined in the bylaws is what their roles are. So however, y'all want them to behave is what is what they're going to be. There's no preset, definition of what a certain committee necessarily has to do or can't do in Roberts. It's up to the body to decide in their bylaws.
There are charters in these bylaws that define the role of the committees.
So, but this is why this part of if we don't want an executive committee with all that power, here's where we can discuss that. And then Brian and Rona can figure the money part later. So thank you.
Can I just say something? I just want to ask the question. I don't really see this as a committee with a lot of power. The committee chairs are the committee chairs. What I see is a way to expedite some of the important things we try to get done. Because if they're making recommendations, then that's the end of that. They don't have absolute power. I think the whole concept that the executive committee has too much power, I don't even understand where that's coming from, because I don't see it. I see it as a focus on utilitarian, how we can get things done more efficiently and more expeditiously. That's what I see.
In what is suggested on section 3, Cora, executive committee, the executive committee shall have the power to act on behalf of the board and report to the board at the following meeting. That's the issue that several of us are having. So
the motion on the table is to remove that, to remove the $3,500 expenditure and replace that with the board. The executive committee has the ability to make a recommendation to the board. So any other discussion, or should we move to a vote? So that's the motion. Stacy, not here. Quorum.
I'm sorry, I have to be a little dense on this. So I'm recommending to have a recommendation as opposed to report to. That's the issue, right?
No, for the board, for the executive committee to recommend to the board, as opposed to the executive committee having the power to do something on behalf of the board.
Recommend to the board. Okay, I'll vote for that. Yes.
So that's a yes. Maggie?
Yeah, I would vote in recommendation of recommending to the board.
Juanice? Rona? Natalie? I think Natalie had to leave.
No.
Oh. Kimber? Marianne?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Cece?
No.
Carla? Hector?
No.
Jose?
yes.
Gretchen? Or Gretchen had to leave? Derek?
No,
Yes.
Gretchen wanted to be called.
Okay.
You need Derek's vote.
Derek?
I said yes.
Thank you.
So give me a second, I will call.
Call Gretchen, and I changed my vote to no.
Gretchen's number somewhere.
I'm so confused about what we're voting on.
What we're voting on was a motion that we take out of what was proposed by the Bylaws Committee, the phrase around the executive committee having the power to act on behalf of the board, that we take out of the recommendation from the Bylaws Committee, the phrase around the executive committee being able to expend $3,500, and that we add instead that the executive committee will have the power to make a recommendation to the board. That's what we're voting on. That's the motion.
Can y'all see the screen where it's highlighted?
So let me.
Okay, so Chairman Van Lee, just to be super clear here, I believe that executive committees are good governance practice, and they're very standard in governing bodies like boards. And so I am voting to empower the executive committee as needed. So whatever that vote is, yes or no, I want to fully empower the executive committee.
Okay, so your vote is, yeah. Hi, it's Reggie.
So you're voting no then if you're empowering.
So you're voting no.
Sorry, can you talk now?
Yes, I am. It's good governance practice to
I'm sorry.
maintain
So
the strength of the executive committee, and I'm voting to do that.
Say no.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my vote has changed to no.
The motion on the floor is for the executive committee to exist, but to only have the power to make a recommendation to the board, but not to just take actions on behalf of the board. That's both with respect to actions taken and with respect to expenditures. Okay. Gretchen voted no. Thank you, Gretchen. Sorry to bother you. Right. She said she had a needle in her leg. So let me go back again. Cora, what was your vote? Can you all hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, my vote is no.
Vote is no. Maggie?
My vote is no.
No. Rona?
No.
Natalie?
No.
Marianne?
No.
There's a change. Mariah?
Yes.
Yes. Cece?
No.
Carla?
I vote for the board to be able to make decisions. So that would be no.
No. Hector?
No.
Jose?
Yes.
Gretchen was a no. And Derek?
No change, it was a yes.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 no's. We have 1, 2, 3 yeses. So that motion does not carry. So that means this stays as written. So where do we go, Jeff?
So the whole document now is open to any amendments that anyone might
I'm
have.
sorry, there was a note, a chat note about we didn't discuss arts education. Who did that come from? Someone put a note that we didn't discuss arts education.
But there was, could we go back and just, who would want to amend arts education? That's the question that would have to be on the table before you have a discussion. So I'm not following who would, I can't see the chat board somehow.
So, Reggie and Rona, I mentioned it. It just seemed that it was sort of hopped over and I didn't know it had to be discussed, so.
It doesn't if there's no amendment from anyone on the board, no, because we didn't discuss any other committee like IDEA or anything, you know, it's only if there's an amendment is what you're discussing, David, by someone on the board.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So my understanding of where we are, even after the lengthy discussion, is we did approve a change to on the personal authority piece that says the executive director, that the commission is the personal authority of the executive director, stop, and the executive director is the personal authority of the staff. That we did change to align with the statute. In all other cases, the whole notion about combining public arts and grants, the notion we just talked about, executive committee, all those other things, the motions to amend it did not pass. So it stands as written. Am I saying this right, Jeff?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
So now what do we do with this part of the process, Jeff?
We have now one more chance, I believe Jeff and I had discussed, to amend anything that wasn't discussed, but I think we've pretty much gone through it and discussed everything. So
Yeah, the whole document is open for amendment now. And
yeah, but if
The entire revised set of bylaws is now open to amendment. Are there further amendments?
I just have a question with regards to the finance committee and the responsibilities of the finance committee.
Sure.
Jeff, if you can get down to that.
Mhm.
Specifically the duties and what shall be reported. Is this been what was in the bylaws already? Or is this something that's
There's no going back. Everything is brand new. There's no
Okay.
going back. The old bylaws were 2013, and when you do a revision, there was no committee discussion on any one of these. This is what the finance committee met and voted on should be the description of what they do.
It's kind of new to me, but okay. The only question that I have with regards to that is, how does this correlate or how does this mesh with, or these reports, are they or the complete comprehensive report that the finance committee is
That's up to
responsible
you.
for?
That's up to you. See, that's what we didn't do that. We said shall work with the finance staff officer, which is you, to
Right.
provide analysis, oversight, and review.
Okay.
And how you do that.
Okay.
I'm on finance, and I know Cece and I asked this, and basically that first sentence gives you to give our reports how you and Kimber decide you want to give the reports. And the second one is just that we want to harness all the money we can to make our commission successful and sustainable. That's it.
And there actually was no finance committee in the old bylaws.
That's right.
So
That's right. So
I'll ask again, are there any further amendments?
Reggie,
Yes.
I'm going to send it so you, and yes, Rona, I'll read it. Basically, it's just a little housekeeping issue because I tend to focus on words. Throughout the document, there's use of the word agency, board, CAH, but according to the legislation, we're called commission. Can we keep it standard when you're referring to us as commission, the commission, versus going between and board and all of that? Sorry, Rona.
no, I'm sorry. My phone went off and I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. The answer is no, because I asked the same question to me. So in the first article, if you look at the name, the laws say the word agency, so we have to use that word in many. In other words, it says in our enabling act, it says commission. So and then we say the board because we don't want to usurp role and responsibility of the staff.
Okay, so Jeffrey, Jeff, is there any clarification more that you can give to that? Can we stick to one word, board, agency, whichever way, or do we need to just use different terms in different sections?
So is it an issue of that in some places where maybe it should say board, it says agency or CAH or vice versa?
Yeah, I cannot pinpoint exactly, but the bylaws committee can look at it to make sure there is some consistency. Like I said, this is just like a little housekeeping issue. Thank you.
Reggie, I think we're now up to the adoption of the bylaws, and that's.
What I was writing is, if we get to approval, I was going to say with correct punctuation and consistent terminology to be reviewed if necessary. And that could cover your point. That's all, just making note of it. But I'm not there yet.
Reggie?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, some of these requirements existed in the previous bylaws prior to you taking the chairmanship. And I just want to make sure we have language in there that's strong enough to make sure that the bylaws are complied with. For example, in the previous bylaws, I think there was something about commissioners attending meetings with some consistency. In fact, there were instances, as I understood, that those meetings weren't always attended consistently, for example, but they weren't enforced. So my point of this is, it's a question of enforcing or complying with the bylaws, because I think we would serve ourselves well as a body if they were consistently adhered to and accountabilities were held. So I don't know if you think that there's sufficient language here for that kind of compliance, but I just want to make sure I raised it.
Yeah, I mean, my personal view is it's the obligation of the chair to hold us to our commitments. And so once we as a body have agreed to a set of bylaws, the chair at a minimum, but the governance committee as well has, and we didn't have a governance committee before. So between the chair and the governance committee, they should be the conscience of the organization to make sure we're abiding by the bylaws.
Thank you. That was my assumption. I just wanted to note it.
Yeah. Jose, you're muted, Jose. Jose, you're muted.
As clarification, I just love it how there's so many rumors going around and everybody, and I have heard this, I've heard that. I've been in the commission through, I think, 3 different chairs, and attendance has always been a requirement. That's part of our obligations. And when we get appointed, that's something that we have to do. So as far as I have seen through the years, and there's several of us who have been on the commission for 3 terms, we have attended. And whenever we could not attend, we would do it via phone, or if there was a medical emergency or there was a vacation, then we would let the chair know. And Reggie is right. It is, up to the chair to make sure we're all there, and for us, our responsibility to let them know if we are not able to attend because surgeries or vacation or other trouble. So I disagree with the statement that we have not been meeting in person, because we have, and we had good, solid, robust meetings. Passionate meetings were happening then and will always happen because we're all passionate about what we do. And I'm glad to be part of this group. Thank you.
I just, with all due respect, Jose, I wasn't circulating rumors. It's been my experience that there were specific requirements outlined in the bylaws that were not complied with. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. And so my request is that we all are held accountable to those bylaws if we're going to agree to them. That's all.
And I would just like to back up what Maggie said. And with regard to that, if you look at Article 3, Section 2, our responsibilities, we just don't have to attend. We now have to serve as conveners. We have to attend all meetings. So I think we have put in a lot of responsibilities that haven't been there before.
So I will now take a vote on the bylaws as amended. And again, the one amendment was the personal authority amendment. All the other amendments were voted down, so the document stands as written. So I'll start. Stacy's not here. Cora? Cora? Maggie?
I approve.
Juanice? Rona?
Yes.
Natalie? Kimber?
Yes.
Marianne?
Yes.
Mariah? Mariah?
Yes, I just want to recognize all the hard work that Rona has put into this, and I so appreciate it. I do have some problems with the bylaws as they are at the moment, so I'm going to abstain from this vote if I could.
Cece?
Yes.
Carla? Hector?
Yes.
Jose? Yes. Are you muted?
Yes.
Yes. Gretchen? I guess I should call Gretchen. Derek?
No,
I'm sorry?
was a no.
No. So I'll go back. Stacy's not here. Has Cora returned? Let me call Gretchen just so that,
Back on the phone, but I don't know what I'm voting on.
the full set of bylaws we've gone through. The only amendment that was approved to what was submitted by the bylaws committee was changing the personnel authority so that it aligned with the statute. But everything else, after much discussion and votes, stood as written in the document presented by the bylaws committee. So the question is, do you vote yes or no on this set of bylaws?
Yes.
Cora has not returned. Juanice has not returned. Natalie has not returned. So that is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people.
Wait, Reggie, Cora is trying to call in. She said she's voting, but you're not hearing her.
Oh, is she?
She voted yes in the chat, I think.
She voted yes. Yes.
She
And so did
voted yes in the
Natalie.
chat. Yes.
Natalie voted yes.
I voted yes. I don't know if you heard me, Reggie.
Yeah. Who is that?
Natalie. This is Natalie.
voted yes. And Cora's in the chat.
Yes.
She voted yes.
Cora voted yes. So we don't have Stacy, we don't have Quanice, we have everyone else. So a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 votes. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstain. So we abide by the 2/3 rule. There are 2/3 in the affirmative and the motion is adopted. The commission now has new bylaws, which will be published online with correct punctuation and consistent terminology to be reviewed if necessary.
Yay.
Yay!
And I also join in thanking the bylaws committee for the hard work in getting us to this point. And I thank the commissioners for the passion that we have around this. Bylaws are the governance of any organization. So I want everyone to feel like they had their voice heard. We had the debate we needed to have. I appreciate the passion. I took a Darvon before this meeting, so I was calm. But I appreciate the passion for those who were not sedated during this conversation. Thank you. The next
That bad, huh?
exactly, better living through chemistry, right? Thank you. The next regular meeting of the commission will be held Monday, March 21st, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
I love it.